Hello, and welcome to our next Genesis Bible study. Today we are in Genesis chapter 7, and we're looking at the flood of Noah still. And so this is when the flood actually transpires. So let's just jump right in and take a look. And so we left off last time with Genesis chapter 7, verse 12. And let's just pick it up a little bit from there to get the context. And so we'll start in verse 11 today. It says, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, in the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights." Okay, so that's where we left off. And here is where it says, "In the self same day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the three wives of his sons with them, into the ark." So I want to start here with this part here, in the self same day. So in other words, it's indicating that the day the flood started is the day that they entered the ark. However, if you take a look at this, you'll also note that earlier in our last session, we took note of the fact that it was saying that it was 7 days after they entered the ark that the water of the flood came upon the earth. And so let's go look at that real quick and just take a look at some possibilities here. And so it says, "And Noah went in," so that's him going into the ark, "and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him into the ark," because of the waters of the flood that were about to come, of course. And it says, "Of clean animals and animals that were not clean, and birds and everything that creeped on the ground, there went into the ark two, male and female, as God had commanded Noah." And again, I memorized this in a different translation, so it's a little bit different than I'm reciting it. But it says, "And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth." And so what is this business with, "and it came to pass after 7 days," when here it says the self same day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah? And this is where there is a tradition in ancient tradition back from the days of the Jews, and of course early Christian fathers and writers believed this also. And there is a tradition that we know that Methuselah, who was Noah's great-grandfather, and as he was still alive on the earth up until the year of the flood, he died in 1656, and so it was believed that he died exactly 1 week before the flood. So in other words, they get everything ready. They get all of the livestock and the animals and the creeping things and the birds, etc., etc. They get everything into the ark, and as they get all the animals into the ark, they go back out of the ark. Of course, the Bible doesn't say that, but it's inferred from the language here that they went out to bury and pay final respects to Methuselah. Of course, his name, as we covered in our Genesis 5 session, his name clearly means "his death shall bring," or "his death shall bring about," or cause to come. And so his death certainly signified the flood, because as soon as he died, it was only, by tradition, 7 days later that the flood came. And so some have speculated that there would be some similar warning, because we know that Jesus says here in Matthew, he says in Matthew 24:37, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." And so notice this is very, very telling, okay, and this really speaks very powerfully to the pre-tribulation rapture, because this doesn't fit in any other context, okay? And so look at what is said here. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And they knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, and here Jesus' own words talking about the rapture. Then shall two be in the field, one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, one be taken, the other left. And then in Luke's account, there's another one added where it says two will be sleeping in the same bed, one will be taken, one will be left. And so this is a clear indication that it's sudden, it's out of nowhere, it's a surprise. Life is going on as normal, and then there is suddenly a rapture of the church. And that is what this is detailing. And so you can't place this in any other context, because if you put it at the midpoint of the tribulation, or if you put it at the end of the tribulation, mid-trib or post-trib, it doesn't work, because people aren't going to be unawares during that time. People are going to be enslaved. People are going to be going through world war. People are going to be going through famine, pestilence, plague, martyrdom, hiding, running from authorities, mark of the beast implementation, and there's going to be terrors and signs in the heavens, and horrors happening on earth, and demonic locust with scorpion stingers coming out to sting men for 5 months, and all of these things are going to be going on. In all of that mayhem, there wouldn't obviously not be people marrying and giving in marriage, eating and drinking, being merry, and just going about their lives, la-di-da, like nothing's happening. You have 100-pound hailstones falling from the earth. Are there people getting married and giving in marriage in that context? Just the notion of that is clearly absurd. It's an absolute absurdity to think that the rapture is post-trib. And then even mid-trib, if you know what the first 3.5 years of the tribulation are like and study them, as you clearly can in the book of Revelation, you'll see that this is, everybody will know that worldwide horrors and terrors are going on. It's not going to be a time where people are just la-di-da going about their daily lives. It's going to be nightmare on earth. And so very clearly here, it says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, there's going to be people who are ready. And so some believe, and I don't necessarily believe it, I don't necessarily not believe it, but that perhaps just like Methuselah dying, this prominent ancient figure, this great patriarch, just like him passing away 7 days before the flood, it's very likely that some very, very significant event would happen, and possibly just signal to the believers who are ready, who've prepared. It's not going to be any time for you to build an ark. You're not going to be able to go and suddenly, maybe you can, but I don't believe you're going to be able to suddenly just go get saved, sanctified, sealed, and delivered from all your bondage and become a great spirit-filled Christian who's ready to go in the rapture in like 1 second. I believe, the people who have been living their lives and are ready and are watching and waiting, as Jesus himself commands us right here in Matthew 24:42. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. And so notice this very key rapture verse right here. Notice this, a very key rapture verse. Many people don't pick up on it. Notice it. Very clever. Okay. Watch therefore, for you, or ye, know not what hour your Lord doth come. See, he's not speaking to people in the tribulation they're not he's not their Lord. He's not speaking to the whole world here. He's speaking to believers and believers only. It's saying for you, believers, Christians, you, the ones who I am your Lord, you know not what hour I'm coming. So be ready. And so that's very clear that he's talking specifically, not to the whole world. He's talking here to believers only. Because if he were talking to the whole world and saying you're not going to know when this is going to happen, then it clearly wouldn't make sense, because the tribulation being unleashed, as we see in Revelation starting in chapter 6 and going forward from there through chapter 19, the terrors and horrors of what's going on earth are going to be a nightmare for anybody who is left behind. And so, very clear, you can see it right here. You know not what hour your Lord doth come. So that part's going to be a surprise if there is if it was at the midpoint or the end. We would clearly know when that was. It wouldn't be a surprise. We would know that there was the confirming of a covenant to go forth, and we would know that that covenant with many had been signed, and you could start counting from that day, and you could say 3.5 years from that day is when the midpoint's going to be, and so you would know exactly what day it was coming. And likewise, the end, you could count 7 years from that moment. And so it's just absolutely absurd. People are extremely ignorant of this, unfortunately. But anyway, let's keep our focus on Genesis chapter 7. But this is part of it, though, because notice, it'll be like it was in the days of Noah. And so you can go make a whole study of that. But we know what was going on in the days of Noah. What is the number one reason God gives Noah? It's actually in Genesis 6. We already covered it. Let's just go review it for this sake of this video. God is saying that all flesh is corrupted. Okay. But there's one other thing that God tells Noah. Notice this in 6:13. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, and here it is. For the earth is filled with violence because of them, and behold, I'm about to destroy them with the earth. Okay, so right there he says it. The earth is filled with violence. That's the reason that he gives Noah for bringing the flood of water on the earth. The earth is filled with violence. And we can certainly see that is absolutely true today. The earth is filled with violence, not only physical violence. It's filled with violence in the sense of violence against God, iniquitous behavior against God, abominations against God, abominations against his creation and his created beings, the abominations of what they're trying to do to our bodies, the violence being done to his people, and of course the violence that's being done from person to person is included in that as well. But there's immense violence against God and his people, and against his creation, and against all that he's done. So there's immense violence going on right now, and so it'll be just like it was in the days of Noah. And so we see that it's close, getting very, very close. Okay, so anyway, that's a little bit about that. Same day. So that means, they had gone into the ark, 7 days had gone by, they'd gone out of the ark, apparently by tradition, to go pay final respects to Methuselah and bury him and give him a proper funeral, or whatever you want to call it, memorial service. And then, of course, we see here that Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons with him, they go into the ark. And, of course, they and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every bird after his kind, every bird, every wing. And so as they go in, it says that they go in unto Noah into the ark 2 of all flesh, in which is the breath of life. And so they went in side by side, and I like that too, because it talks about how they go in the next verse here, male and female, so that's the 2. So some some groups of animals went in 7, 7. 7 of this animal and 7 of that animal. But even of the 7s, they go in side by side, 2 and 2. So they enter in side by side. And so that's a picture also of the just the intimate relationship of how God created his creation for man and his wife to go in to life together, to go into the protection of the ark together, and all of the animal kind of various types of animals, of cattle and various beasts and various birds and creeping things even, they go in male and female, two, side by side, into the ark of protection. And so I think we talked about this last time, but just real quick, I want to point it out again. Isaiah 26, verse 20 says, "Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity, and the earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain." Okay, so this is talking about a similar event. This is also talking about the rapture. The Lord's going to come out of his place to punish the earth. So he takes us out first. He says, "Come, enter into the place I've prepared for you, your chambers that he's prepared for us." We see that, of course, John 14:3. "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, ye may be also." And so that's what this is talking about. And then as it goes on, he says he's now going to come out of his place and destroy the wickedness of everything that's going on the earth because of all the iniquity that's going on. So just like Noah, people are going to come into their chambers, right? Come into their rooms for protection, and then he shuts the door. So notice what it says here: "Enter into your chambers and shut thy doors." And just like we're going to see here in a minute, that God shuts the door, and then at that moment, that's it. It's over, and the judgment is going to come. And so as we see that, we will continue reading here. Let's look at Genesis 7:17. "And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters." And so notice that those who go into the ark, Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, they are all protected in their chambers during the judgment that's destroying all other life. And so there is a moment here, and it says right here, "And God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in." Okay, so he's shutting Noah and his family in. Remember, Noah means comfort, but it also, backwards, it means grace. It's the word for grace. And so it's comfort and grace. And so as soon as Noah had gone into the ark, it's a signal that grace was protected in the ark, but God closes the door to grace. Okay, so Noah, who represents grace, God's grace, he goes into the ark, but now the door of grace, the age of grace, so to speak, prophetically speaking, has been closed. And of course, we know the door is none other than Jesus Christ. He says, "I am the door." And so you can only come in by me. You have to enter through him, the door, to get into the kingdom of God. And so Noah has gone in to his chambers with his wife and his sons and their wives, and they are protected. And as they are protected, the door that lets you into grace, that lets grace come out and come in and go in, that door has now been shut. God is the one who shuts it. And so from that moment on, there will be no more grace. There will only be judgment to all those who are outside of the ark. So our ark, as we talked about it last time, the ark for us is the cross. The door is Jesus and him on the cross, and that is the ark that we enter. We enter through the cross, and through our faith in his atoning death and our confession of him as Lord and Savior and our belief that God raised him from the dead, that is how we enter into the ark. And then, of course, those words there, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, and confess with your mouth Jesus as Lord, those words are in the aorist tense in Greek. And so it's an indication that it's not just something like a one-time get your ticket punch type of deal. It means that as you confess and go on confessing him as Lord, in other words, it becomes your life, it becomes your lifestyle, it becomes your mode of living, that you confess him as Lord. And you believe in your heart that God raised from the dead. It's like you believe in your heart that God did that, and you go on believing that as the central theme of your life. That's what it really means, is you confess and go on confessing with your mouth, and you believe and go on believing in your heart that God raised him from the dead. You will be saved, and you will go on throughout your life being saved. So no, it's not a one-time get your ticket punched kind of action. It is something that you become. It becomes your life. It becomes the central theme and focus of your life as a believer. And hey, that's a beautiful thing. What's wrong with that? It's something that you enter into that relationship with him through that, but then you keep that relationship going. Okay, so I love the way certain pastors and teachers have expressed it. It's like a marriage relationship, and it really is. You don't just say I do, and then you go your separate ways and you never talk to each other again, and you never express your love for one another again, and you forget that you believe that she's your wife or he's your husband, or that's absurd. When you enter into that marriage covenant, you enter in and then you go on into it, continuing to be married. You continue to say I do every day. You continue to express love for one another on a regular basis, on a daily basis. You do that. It's not to think that you just say something one time, get your ticket punched, and then walk away is an absurd notion. Okay, don't. If that's the type of salvation you're counting on, I pray that you will very seriously seek the Lord on that and get yourself sorted. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling if you think that that's the type of salvation that you're counting on, getting your ticket punched type of deal. Okay, so as we move on here, and they went in, okay, and we already got that, okay, and then here we go. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. And so here, as the object lesson goes, this is the cleanup. God is cleansing everything off of the face of the earth, all the wickedness, all the despicableness, all the sin, all the iniquity, all the abominations, all the gross abominations that happened with the 200 angels who rebelled as per the book of Enoch. Not in the Bible, not in the canon, but an accurate record of history that Enoch left for us about the 200 angels, and you can go read about it in the book of Enoch and what their names were and what they did and how they procreated with human women and created this bastard race of Nephilim, and they have different names, Rephaim and Emim and Zamsumim and Avim and Anakim, and you have all these different variations of them, and we talked about that in our Nephilim video a few sessions back, so you can go watch that if you want to see all the details about that. But all those creatures, they were wiped out. They were completely destroyed, and they were killed in the flood. Also, all the wicked people, the human beings who indulged in all of that and participated in that, and who had been corrupted in their gene pool, and all these wicked people who had started living after the lusts of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life, and they started going into all that type of mode of living, they were all wiped out. And likewise, the rapture of the church is going to signal and signify a moment when come into the ark, come into your chambers, my people, and rest for a little while until the indignation is past. And then God is going to pour out his wrath on an unbelieving world, and grace will be over. You can still get saved, but your salvation is going to cost you your head. And so it's not going to be a fun time. It's not going to be like get saved and go to church. It's going to be get saved and run for your life and try to survive as long as you can and save as many people as you can with the message of Jesus Christ to as many as it can go to while people are running for their lives. It's not going to be, you know, get saved and have your white picket fence life. It's not going to be that way during the tribulation. It's going to be get saved for eternity, because in mortality you're about to die in the wars or the famines or the plagues or the martyrdom or any of the other calamities that are going to be coming upon the earth during the tribulation time, during the seals and the trumpets and the bowl judgments. It's going to be a nightmare. And so you can still get saved, but the grace is over. It's not going to be pretty. And so let's look at this cleansing aspect. We see some here. Notice this, that 1 Peter, we talked about this last time also, which sometime were disobedient when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. In the like figure whereunto even baptism doth also now save us, not the putting away of the filth of the flesh. In other words, not the actual act of washing your body by going down and being raised out of the water. It's not talking about a cleanliness thing, but it is a symbolic act saying that you are identifying in Christ's death, buried with him in baptism, and raised to new and eternal life with him out of the water, so to speak. And so as you go through that process, it's the answer of a good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so it's a picture of identifying with him in his death, and therefore identifying with him in his resurrection to new life that he invites you to share in. And so also here, let's see, did we have anything here? Okay, yeah, I think we covered that last time, so we'll move on. Okay, and so we'll get into some technical stuff here, so this is really interesting. And it says, and the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth. So this is a big cleanup job. There's a lot of filth, a lot of wickedness, a lot of evil people. And right now in the world today, there's a lot of filth, a lot of wickedness, and a lot of evil people. And so this cleanup job is going to be very severe. And so the waters, and this time it's not going to be by water. That's just a prefigure of the ultimate judgment, which is coming by fire. And so we know that the fire, the prefigured judgment, was like unto baptism, like baptizing the world and saying, okay, now we're going to get a fresh start. And Noah and his 3 sons were allowed to come out of the ark. We're going to see that in the next session and the next couple of sessions, actually. We'll talk about all the aspects of that. But as they come out and they repopulate the earth, kind of in a baptized sense, a baptized world, like, okay, now that we've been baptized, so to speak, we've identified with God's cleansing through his righteous judgment, through the baptism of the flood. Now we're going to enter into this new age of mankind. And so, guess what happened? Just like when Jesus came and he died on the cross and paid for sin, and he resurrected from the dead and then ascended into heaven and sent the Holy Spirit on Pentecost to empower and equip the message of the gospel to go forth to the ends of the earth. Just the same way, has evil ceased? Is there no more evil in the world now? Or is there still plenty of evil? And obviously, that's a rhetorical question. There's still plenty of evil, there's still plenty of wickedness, there's still judgment, but just now has opened up the window of grace. The window of grace has opened up for a season of time, and we're right at the end of that time. That time of that window of grace opening up to people is coming to a close, and it's coming to a close very, very soon. Some say this year, or next year. Very, very high possibility that we could be looking at the rapture very, very soon. Some say a few more years, but I think there's just about nobody that I know of that doesn't believe for sure, and this is with complete and total confidence. There's no one that I know of in any circle of serious prophecy fulfillment, prophecy teachers, prophets themselves, evangelists, pastors, teachers, etc. There's no one that I know of at all that believes that this isn't happening this century. So in other words, the century that we're in, it's going to happen this century. There's not going to be any, hundreds of years from now. It's happening this century. Now, when I say that, that makes some people mad because a lot of people, including myself, are very keen on the possibility that it could be happening. This could all start happening this decade, not just this century, but this decade. And certainly, we're not here to set dates or anything, but I believe that it is okay to look at milestones. And so there's some Jubilee milestones that have transpired. There's some various types of calendars that people are looking at and different date counts and stuff like that. And so possibly and probably the ultra way far out, the furthest possibility out that anybody's looking at is 2067 AD, which is basically just about 43 years from now. That's the latest possible date that all this is going to happen. But much more likely, it's much sooner than that, including could be today, could be later today, could be tomorrow, could be later this year, could be next month. A lot of things happening prophetically. So it's very close. We're definitely in the season. We're in the window. The door is very close to being shut. And so anybody who's not saved, if you're not sure if you're saved, you need to get with the Lord. Get with a believer, a pastor, a teacher, somebody who you know to be a reliable and mature believer in Christ, and have them talk to you. Because if you're not ready and this happens, you are going to be in huge trouble. Huge trouble. And it's going to be, you're going to enter into a nonstop nightmare. And so please receive the free gift of salvation. All it costs, it's not totally free. It does cost you one thing, but the only thing it costs you is your pride. Just surrender your pride. Get down on your knees, pray to the Lord, ask Him to save you, and He will. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. Believe in your heart God raised Him from the dead. Read the Bible, read the Gospel of John, read the book of Romans, and start finding a fellowship where you can start building your faith, because the time is extremely short. Okay? Don't bank on the 50 years from now, or the 20 years from now, or even the 10 years from now. Don't bank on that. That would be very foolish to do that. Start living for Him now, because the only way to avoid eternal damnation in the near future is going to be to die for Him then, and you don't want to have to do that. You don't want to die for Him then. What you want to do is die to yourself now. Die to yourself now and live for Him. Then you won't have to die for Him later. And even if you had to die for Him in this world, for whatever reason, some persecution or somebody comes against you for some reason, then it would be an honor. You would consider it an honor and a joy to be able to do that, win a martyr's crown, so to speak. So anyway, but this is a huge cleanup job. It's 40 days upon the earth, and this is very interesting because we're going to look here now at some stuff, and I'm going to give you some math or arithmetic, basic arithmetic. And notice this, and the water prevailed exceedingly upon all the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. Now, notice this, it says 15 cubits higher did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. Okay, so a cubit is probably roughly about 18 inches is what it's talking about here. And so, if you multiply 18 times that, you get an idea of how many feet, if you want to put it in feet, or you could convert it to meters, or whatever you want to do. But it's roughly 18 inches is what this means. 1 cubit is roughly 18 inches. And so this is very interesting because it goes back to the dimensions of the ark. Okay, so let's look at a few things here. If we go back to chapter 6 real quick, we're going to see that in chapter 6, God gives Noah the dimensions of the ark. And he tells him, here it is, make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms you shall make in the ark, and you shall pitch it inside and out with pitch. Remember, that word means atonement. If you look it up, it's the same word that's used for atonement. And so we've been pitched inside and out with pitch with the blood of Christ. That's our ark, our atonement. And so notice here, though, we have the length of the ark, 300 cubits, the breadth of the ark, 50 cubits, and the height, 30 cubits. Now notice this. Here's the one I want to show you, 30 cubits. Well, this is very interesting because if you take that 30 cubits, that's the height of the ark, and you do all the arithmetic. There's some geniuses that have done all this. I'm not gonna belabor it here, but I'll just show you. You can go study all the architecture and engineering of the way the ark was constructed. There's some speculation because it doesn't give the blueprints to us in the Bible, but you can make inferences, and there's all kinds of good stuff there. And that's their work, though, so I don't want to sit here and belabor that. I'm just going to show you that you could go to places like Answers in Genesis, and there's some other places that have done that work. But it's really interesting because the ark was kind of like a barge. It was a barge-style watercraft, and as it was, its displacement would, therefore, you have to do some calculations to arrive at this, but because of the nature of the craft that it was, its displacement in terms of how far up the side of the ark did it go down into the water, well, if you take a look, it would be half of the height. Okay, so it would be essentially roughly half the height of the 30 meters would be how far the hull, or the how far the core of the ark would be underwater, and how much of it would be above water. And so when you look at that and you go back here and notice this, that it tells us that the water rose so that it went up 15 feet above the highest mountain peak. Okay, so 15 cubits more above, in other words, 15 cubits above the highest water peak. And so what does that tell us? That God made sure that the water went over the face of the earth 15 cubits above the highest mountain peak, so that no matter where the ark traversed, floating around on the surface of the water, no matter where it went, it would not have any chance of hitting a mountain peak and basically having a wreck. And so that's very interesting just to notice that 15 cubits was exactly, if you do all the calculations, that's exactly the depth of how far the maximum depth that the craft would be underwater, so that it would have no chance of running into any mountains and being shipwrecked. And so I find that interesting. And eventually God directs it to be, to actually lodge on Mount Ararat. Of course, we're going to look at that next time in the next session. But let's just keep going with this. But let's also talk about the nature of the worldwide flood here. Here's a good concept, because if you want to look at, it says all the mountains. Now, I have another theory that I bring about in my book, Creations Week, at the end, when we get into Genesis chapter 2 here. And I did a very thorough research on the four rivers of Eden and how they're described after the flood. And one aspect to that, and I believe this is true, so it's a speculation, it's a theory, but I believe that that during that flood event is when many of the mountain ranges that we now know came to be prominent because of the flood. The cataclysm of the flood raised up these mountain ranges. So it was probably very likely during the flood that many of the mountain features that we see now today on the face of the earth were actually created at that time. In other words, they likely didn't exist before the flood, or if they did, they were much lesser. But during the flood, the cataclysm of the flood, basically the geography and the topography of the earth changed drastically and dramatically, and so you had these big mountain ranges come up, and so it is possible. We don't know for sure, but it's possible that, as an example, the highest known peak we have here, Mount Everest, being essentially almost 30,000 feet above sea level. And so that feature of Mount Everest, well, if that's true, and if that were true at or during the process of the flood, in other words, let's say that this Mount Everest actually was a byproduct of the flood. In other words, the intense pressure on the surface of the earth from the water raised up these incredible mountain ranges. And so there actually is some strong evidence that that's with all the stuff that's in my book, and you can see all of the tectonic plate outlines, and you can see that on those tectonic plates, right along the tectonic plate borders, are where all these giant mountain ranges are. And so all this pressure very likely caused these plate collisions, and these plate collisions vaulted up these high mountain ranges that we see today during the time since the flood. And so I'm not going to get into all the details of that right now, but I just wanted to show you something here really interesting, because I did a real rough calculation. This is super basic, so you could get very specific about it if you wanted to, but I just did a super rough calculation here, and that is if you take the circumference of the earth and the surface area of the whole earth, not just the landmass, but the entire volume, so to speak, or the entire surface area, I should say, and you take that 30,000 feet, and then you go 15 cubits higher than 30,000 feet on Everest, well, that means that there was 5 trillion, with a T, trillion, 5 trillion cubic kilometers, not cubic meters, 5 trillion cubic kilometers of water on the entire face of the earth. 5 trillion cubic kilometers, which would translate to here about 1.2 trillion cubic miles on the face of the entire earth. Now that is a lot of pressure. So you talk about being under pressure. That's more pressure than you can imagine. And so this amount of water, of course, did what? It was basically from the floodgates of the heavens, but it was also from the fountains of the deep. We talked about that last time, how the water burst forth also from underneath and from above, and the rain. There's actually 3 sources of water. We're going to look at that again next time. And so those 3 sources of water created this massive amount of water over the face of the earth, because you had this huge cleanup that was needed, and this refreshing, but also it's the provision of water that we needed here on earth for the next after the time of the flood until the 6,000 years, or even take it into the millennium. It's the amount of water that would be needed to sustain life for the rest of God's program, for the rest of His plan to play out. It's the amount of water that we would need for all of those, for all of the provision of life and everything else that we would need during the rest of the time of the renewal after Noah and his 3 sons and their wives had, repopulated the earth. And so I find that interesting. But that water weight, here's the problem with uniformitarians. There's a concept called uniformitarianism. And this uniformitarianism is an assumption that the way things are now, the way we measure them, the way we see things, the way we observe things, with, for instance, deposition rates. So there's something called deposition. And deposition just means deposits. And so over time, we get silt, and we get rain, and we get wind, and we get soot, and we get, various things piling up, coming down from the atmosphere, and we get little by little, over the centuries, you have deposits on the face of the earth, and these things kind of slowly increase over time, and they slowly increase over time, and they slowly increase over time. And that's why when you do this excavation of this archaeological site, it'll be, so many feet below the surface of the earth. It'll be like they dig down and they find, oh, look, there was this civilization. And when they estimate, well, this civilization must have lived at such and such a time, they're doing that based on what they believe the deposition rates to be now, extrapolated back all the way through history. So they assume a constant deposition rate, which is false. It's inaccurate. There is not a constant deposition rate. Clearly, the flood throws all of that completely out of alignment. And so the other hilarious thing is they'll all talk about, oh, there's fossils, there's sea creatures and fossils up in the high mountain peaks, and they'll say, oh, the whole earth at various times was under an ice age, or underwater at this time, underwater at that time. But it was millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, and billions of years ago, whatever it might be. And that is all based on a uniformitarianist concept of assuming that the rate of change and the rate at which things are happening now is the exact same rate they've always happened throughout all of time. And that is provably false. It's empirically provably false. We literally know that is absolutely false. It is not true. And the biggest one, and you can go back and watch the first videos in our series here on Genesis, the first few sessions, Genesis chapter 1, the first few verses, and I did a couple of videos on it, with the speed of light slowing down, and the amazing research from Barry Setterfield, and all the analysis he's done on the redshift data, and the fine structure constant, and how he has demonstrated that indeed the speed of light has indeed been slowing down. The ZPE, the 0-point energy, which is the mass of basically electromagnetic radiation that is seething in every cubic inch of the universe, the fabric of space itself, as the ZPE has increased, the speed of light has decreased proportionally. So it's a very, very delicate measurement, because the on the whole, the proportions are always the same. So it would appear, it gives the speed of light the appearance of constancy, but what's actually constant is the ratio, the proportion between the increase of the ZPE and the decrease of the speed of light. And it normalized in right at roughly 2800 BC. So that's when the speed of light normalized. It's on a cosecant sine squared wave curve. So basically what that means is, it was going this fast, and then it leveled out, and it started going more the speed at what we're used to it today. And so that's basically what it was. And right around 2800 BC, that's when it hit the curve. That's when, it goes down, and then it curves and goes out, it flattens out. But that curve happened right around 2800 BC. Before that, the speed of light was massively faster, hundreds, tens to hundreds of millions of times faster than it is today. And so when you see his research on it, incredible stuff. He has a series of videos on it. Sadly, of course, the secular scientific community, and even sadly, many of the creation scientist community, because they're cowards, basically. Sadly, they're cowards. They don't like standing up to the establishment and holding on. They know if they try to, they'll take their PhDs away and all that. So they don't like standing up for truth, and they're cowards, and they try to come up with other lame excuses and reasons. But I am confident that anybody who's a Spirit-filled believer in Christ, if you watch Barry Setterfield's videos on the speed of light and the ZPE and the plasma model of creation that he's demonstrated, has even recreated miniature versions of it in the laboratory, demonstrating it empirically as an absolutely viable theory for creation, with the plasma filaments and everything else going through the universe. It's unbelievable. It's an awesome work, and it perfectly 100% aligns with biblical truth, and explains everything in the 6,000 years of creation. And the gravitation model is in crisis more and more every day, and they're just basically running on inertia of the mass acceptance, the mass formation psychosis, I call it, of acceptance of society, that it's billions of years, and the gravitation model and the Big Bang, and it's that whole theory is in complete crisis. And they're coming up with all kinds of ways to try to cover their tracks and say different things about how they're still, basically they know that their model is broken. There really is no way to reconcile it. A plasma ZPE model, however, it explains everything and accounts for everything perfectly. So he has a series of videos. I encourage every Christian to go watch it. BarrySetterfield.org. Creation Science Research, I believe, is the name of their organization. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. And anyway, these deposition rates and all this stuff, you could see that, if you go to a site like the Grand Canyon, or if you go to Canyonlands in Utah, or you go to Carlsbad Caverns, and you talk about all these formations of the caverns, of the canyons, of all these things, and you see the erosion, and they see all these, you can see all these layers and levels. Well, you have to understand that if you had 1.2 trillion cubic miles of water weight on the whole surface of the Earth, and that water got absorbed by the Earth and percolated down back into the Earth and its aquifers and underground water reserves, then that caused massive geologic change at that time. And so Barry Setterfield also has some amazing stuff with the geologic column, and how that reconciles with the speed of light plasma ZPE model that he's demonstrated and constructed. And so, it's so sad because people, very sadly, they believe that these so-called genius scientists, who are not geniuses, the vast majority of them are maybe good at arithmetic. They maybe have 135 IQs, so they're smart. Good for them. But, the vast majority of them are not truly smart. And what do I mean by truly smart? Truly smart is somebody who goes and investigates it for themselves. They don't just parrot out what their professor told them. So the vast majority of physics students, and the vast majority of physics teachers, and the vast majority of physicists in general, they are smart in the sense that they know how to do math, and they know how to do equations, and they have good spatial reasoning and spatial intelligence, but they're not smart in this sense. They're not smart in going and being able to check out things for themselves. They're basically parrots. They parrot out what their professors taught them. And so they learn how to do a bunch of very impressive math, and they learn how to do all these different types of equations, and they're very good at that, and a lot of people aren't, so that makes people think, oh, these people are in some other class of intelligence. I'm not even in their sphere. And they feed off of that. They love that separation that makes them think like they're, billions of times smarter than anybody else, and they're not. As a matter of fact, like I said, the vast majority of them are parrots. All they do is parrot out the paradigm that their professors have taught them. And their professors, likewise, have parroted out what their professors taught them. And we're on the third generation of that right now. But there's a few people who are truly smart, like Barry Setterfield, who actually have the intelligence to be able to go back and question the entire model, question the entire structure of everything, and go back and actually look at the raw data and not theories that other people have had about the raw data, and actually look at it for themselves. And so there's very, very few people smart enough to do that. And so don't be afraid of science people or physicists. The vast majority of them, first of all, don't know what they're talking about in terms of that anyway. And those who do, the vast majority of them are parrots. They parrot out a paradigm that was propagated upon them by their professors. A lot of alliteration there. I like P alliteration. So don't listen to propagation of propaganda by paradigm professors professing all of that poppycock. So anyway, moving on. Notice this. This is a very important one. I want to get into this a little bit. And all flesh died that moved on the face of the earth, both of the birds and the cattle and the beasts and every creeping that creeps upon the earth, and all mankind. Everybody died. There wasn't anybody who survived the flood. The Nephilim didn't survive the flood. The Rephaim didn't survive the flood. How did they reemerge in Deuteronomy? Very easy. Go back and look at Genesis 6, verse 4. It says there were giants in the earth in those days, right? The days of Noah, and also afterwards. In other words, after the days of Noah. Why were they there after the days of Noah? Well, the same business with the fallen angels. There was more angels that fell, and as those angels fell, they did the same business. And so there was the Nephilim stuff happening before the flood, and then after the flood, more angels fell, and more bad business happened, and there was more Nephilim that happened after the flood. Simple as that. Very easy solution there, right in the Bible. Okay, so, but this is very interesting because I want to get into something here, and I need to do it because it is frustrating me with some teachings that are going out from teachers that I love and respect, but it's a bad teaching, and I need to correct it. It was taught publicly, so I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to correct it publicly because some people have been misled. And so notice this, how many people go into the ark? Well, there's 8 people. And Noah and his wife don't really have any further procreation. It's only 3 groups. So that's Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their wives. And they essentially end up going into different areas and regions of the earth. And so really they each have their own individual region of the earth that they end up populating. And so that gets to the uncomfortable concept of what we now call incest. And here, this goes back to Genesis chapter 1, okay? And keep in mind that as of Leviticus, which was under Moses, who was the 27th generation from Adam, at that time, God forbade the practice. You couldn't do it anymore. And it says in Leviticus that all the nations that were on the earth, all the nations that the Hebrews were coming out of, it says they were all practicing that. It says that in Leviticus. They were all doing it. Even up to the time of Moses, all the nations were doing it. The people were marrying their sisters and their cousins and so on and so forth. That was the norm. And there's even a lot of evidence biblically, inferences biblically, but evidence historically that they started wondering, why are all these deformities happening to us, and what's going on with our lifespans are plummeting, and we're getting all these deformed people, and what's happening. And they slowly but surely started figuring out they needed to stop intermarrying within the family. That's what they realized. And so God had the Israelites stop doing that before everybody else. And that's just a fact of history. So you have to understand that with Adam and his wife and their immediate children, there were no genetic, other than the sin nature, as yet, there were no compounded genetic negative traits. So we know from today that if you intermarry, if anybody was to commit that sin and intermarry with a close relative of, let's say, a cousin or something like that, or even worse, like a sister, horrible, that would be horrible, because not only is it taboo and gross and immoral and wrong, especially in our context of understanding, it also is an abomination for the child, because they're going to have those compounded tendencies to negative traits from the father and the mother being such close relatives. They're going to have a much higher chance of having extreme health problems, extreme deformities, and so on and so forth. And so this is actually picked up in the Bible. There are evidences of some of the pharaohs and some of these other groups that tried to keep the royal line intermarrying within the royal line, extreme deformities and dwarfism and all these other horrible things that happened to these children because they got the negative physical traits compounded upon them over many, many generations. And then you had all these, and that's one of the reasons why when Abram comes into Egypt, they're already starting to see the results of this. They're starting to see the results, and they're seeing their offspring are becoming badly deformed, and so as they are badly deformed, they're looking for fresh, non-deformed, beautiful women to freshen up the gene pool to help their problem. And that's why when Abram comes in, he's like, they're going to kill me and they're going to take my wife Sarah because she's beautiful. And it actually is, part of that was actually because of the gene pool problem that all the other nations slowly started figuring out, like, oh, this is starting to become a problem for us. And so you have to understand that back in those days, it was a normal thing to do, even though we are appalled by it. Back then, before the gene pool problem started and the negative traits started compounding, not only was it not a problem, it was the common practice. Historically, you can prove it genetically through the DNA, the genome, and they've studied and traced humanity back to a certain number of men and women, which corresponds to the Bible perfectly, by the way. You can go study it and you can see that, yes, it was, basically that's the way it happened. We came from, everybody on earth can be traced back to 7 fathers and 8, four fathers really, 8 total, but 4 fathers, and 4 mothers. So they can trace everybody back to that, to the time of the flood. And then, of course, from there, it all came from Noah, of course. So we know that it happened. And so there's this false teaching. It is a wrong teaching. And I'm going to show you how to look at this teaching. And that says that, when God first made everybody, he made mankind, and he made a whole bunch of people. And then he just made Adam as this separate, special person. And that's completely wrong, and I'm going to blow that up right now. And so here's the argument in Genesis 1:26. It says, and God said, let us make man. And here you see the Hebrew word, Adam, and it can mean man and it can mean mankind. We went over this before, but I'm going to give you a little bit more ammunition on this right now. So notice here it's translated man 408 times, men, in other words, man in general, 121 times. It's translated as Adam himself, the man Adam, 13 times. But it's also translated as or defined as mankind, meaning that it means mankind, but it depends on the context of how you use it. Okay? And so it's a human being, an individual, or the species, mankind, and that's actually absolutely correct. And so, yes, you can say that when it says in Genesis 1:26, and God said, "Let us make man in our image," you could say that that's to mean to make mankind. But that doesn't mean that he made like hundreds of people. And you could see that in the text, and here it is very, very clearly, okay? Because you also have to go take it in context and read it with chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man. Okay, now notice this. Look at this, because here, the Hebrew word here has this hey, implying a specific man, and it gets even more specific than that. Okay, because you have this inflected character appended to the word Adam here, which you didn't have in verse 26, but it is here. And notice this, and here's where the clincher is. In his image, in the image of God, created he him. Et. This is a definite article, et, right there. And so you can see it. It's not translated in English because the Hebrew construction of articles is different in Hebrew than it is in English. But if you look at this, it's sign of the definite direct object, not translated in English, but generally preceding and indicating the accusative. And so here is a definite article indicating that when it says he, him, it's talking about a specific man, Adam. Okay, so here, and God said, behold, so God created man, and remember that's with the appended he in front of the word man, translated man there, not uninflected, but inflected. And then it says, in the image of God created he, that's one individual, him, male, notice it's not males, plural, and female, not females, plural, created he them. The them is another definite article. You can go look at it here. Another definite article, them, et. It's also speaking directly as an object back to the male and the female, Adam and his wife. So this is speaking specifically of the man, Adam. And so here's the way to correctly read this. And God said, let us make man like mankind. You could definitely justify that, mankind. Even some translations say it, mankind in our image. Okay, but think about this. He's creating mankind, but he's creating mankind through the specific man, Adam, and the specific woman, his wife, later named Eve. So the specific man, Adam, and his wife, Eve, he's going to make mankind through them, our first parents, and only them. And so as you see that, I can show you in several places, and this is a theological debate that has been thoroughly won by the side that I am giving to you here. So don't let somebody who knows Hebrew tell you, oh, it just says mankind, but then they skip verse 27, and they don't deal with the specific man and the specific male singular and female singular here. But you can go look at it. As a matter of fact, I have my, this is the Companion Bible by E.W. Bullinger, basically a genius theologian who wrote a verse-by-verse commentary of the entire Bible. And here's what he says about this matter. And it's right here again in verse 26 and 27. Here are his notes on it. I'm just going to read them to you. And it says, here, let us, the divine purpose is here stated, the divine act not described till 2:7, 21 through 24. Man, Hebrew Adam, no article equals mankind. That's correct. So he says exactly what I just told you. But then, if you continue on from there, so I'm just reading here, give me 1 second, and we're looking here in verse 27, and here it is. Okay, in verse 27, here's his note on the word man that I have highlighted here, or I have male and female highlighted there. But above that, you see man in his own image. Man, here the Hebrew Adam has the article and the demonstrative Hebrew et to indicate that the man Adam, that this is the man Adam created in 2:7, was the man here purposed. And so it is linking Genesis 2:7 with Genesis 1:27 as the man Adam. So he does it. A whole bunch of other theologians do it. And so just because somebody wants to make a theory work, you can't make a theory work when you have to dance around all these other things. Okay, and so higher end hermeneutics, where you're looking at prophetic pictures, prefigures, and typologies, that's fine. You can have your typologies and your prefigures, but it doesn't mean it affects the literal interpretation. You can't abuse the literal historical meaning to make your prophetic typology or prefigure work. You can't do that. Now, do you have to have the literal be maligned to have your prefigure? No, you don't. Not at all. Let's go take a look. Here, that was on the 6th day. Here you have Genesis 2:4, where it talks about the 7th day. And then after that, typologically, Genesis 2:5 through 2:25 is talking about an 8th day. Absolutely, typologically, it's talking about an 8th day. Yes, it is. And as a matter of fact, I cover that in my book. That's what my book is about. As a matter of fact, the title is, here, as you can see right there, Creation's Week, a macrocosm of Creation Week, a study of the 8th day. That's what this book is about. It's a study of the 8th day. It's a study of Genesis 2:6 through 2:25, modeling or prefiguring the 8th day. And it absolutely does, because it's a picture of how Christ is the second Adam, coming from coming out of his side comes his bride, his wife, later named Eve. It's typologically of the church. And absolutely, that's one of the main themes of my book. However, it's called, Creation's Week, a macrocosm of Creation Week, a study of the 8th day. But literally, Genesis 2:5 through 2:7 here, it's just giving further details of what happened on the 6th day. Okay, so you can't go and force your typological figure to force that upon the literal historical history. You can't do it. It's bad teaching. It's an error. And so that needs to be corrected. And so when we see that, when it says, "And the Lord God formed man," this is the man Adam. And now I can prove it to you a whole host of other ways. Okay? So first of all, somebody who was doing this was mocking the idea that all humanity could come from just, there's 4 people, Cain and Abel and Seth and Adam and Eve, and there's 4 people on the earth. So where did Cain get his wife? That's easily answered. First of all, we go and take a look at this. Look at this in 2:5. So if there's a whole bunch of men, right? Mankind, because God just created hundreds of men, males and females, all over the earth. Well, that's contradicted right here in Genesis 2:5. "And every plant of the field before was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. And there was not a man to till the ground." There was no man. So right there, that contradicts the mankind theory in Genesis 1:26. Contradicts it because there is not a man to till the ground right before God forms man. So typologically, yes, this is speaking of the 8th day. Literally, though, it's speaking of the greater, further details of what happened on the 6th day. How else can I prove it? Let's go to Genesis 3. and see that the curse upon the woman, it says Adam, after he's cursed, he names his wife, and he says, and Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Every single person who's alive is the descendant of her. All living. That means everyone who's alive is from Eve. And so you absolutely have to take these things into consideration. You can also go to Romans, several places, and it talks about how we all came from one man, Adam. Very clearly, you can go look it up in Romans chapter 5, I believe it is. There's also a few other passages that talk about how we came from one blood, one man, Adam. And you can go see elsewhere in Scripture where it clearly denotes that. And then this mockery of saying like, oh, well, why was Cain afraid of all these people? Because there was all these people on the earth. Well, Genesis 2:5 says there wasn't. Genesis 2:5 says there was not a man to till the ground. There's not anybody. And so who was Cain afraid of? Well, first of all, by the time Cain is ready to give an offering, the Hebrew age before you could start being your own man and give your own offerings was, and have your own wife, etc., was 30 years old. And so that's an inference, but let's just say it holds true. So before we see this picture here in Adam, let's go to Genesis 5. So Genesis 5 says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God created he him, male and female created he them, and blessed them and called their name Adam. Male and female, the one male and the one female, he called their name Adam in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth. Okay, so how many people believe that for 130 years Eve was barren and didn't have any children, and she had Cain and Abel? Cain killed Abel, and so everybody's just sitting around there with Adam, Eve, Cain, the murderer, and there's nobody else there because Adam and Eve are barren. It's a complete contradiction. Go read Genesis chapter 1 more carefully. What does God say to Adam and Eve? He says, God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. That word should be fill, not replenish. Very clearly, you can go look it up. Let's do it right now, as a matter of fact. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply. It shouldn't read replenish. It should read fill. You could see it very clearly. The number one translation here is fill. 107 times more than any other way it's translated fill or fulfill. It means to fill, not replenish. Replenish is the wrong translation there from the translators. But nevertheless, God says here to fill the earth. That's what his command is. God never gives you a command without the ability to do it. This is the fountainhead of creation. Nobody thinks that Eve is barren or that has fertility problems. There's different accounts that have the actual genealogies. Josephus actually talks about the histories of Adam, and that at one time they actually had the genealogical records of Adam and Eve. And Josephus actually makes a mention of them. He doesn't recount them, but during his day they were known. They actually had access to those records still at that time, and those records were known. They were known. And so, it's speculative, but you could say that Adam and Eve had hundreds of children because they were still having children at the age of 130 years old. And you could see it very clearly here. And the days of Adam, after he had begotten Seth, were 800 years. And notice this, and he begot sons and daughters. So he had plenty of children. And of course, so that mockery of, there's just a few people sitting around. No. You could do a model and show with 0 death rate within that 130 years, with their children and their children procreating with their other children and their other children and other children, within 130 years, you could easily have, with zero death rate, you could already have thousands of people. You could have literally thousands of people already by the time this is happening, by the time Seth is on the scene, and by the time Cain and Abel are there with their wives and their children and their offspring, you could also already have hundreds of people. Hundreds of people are already there. So that's who Cain is afraid of. He's afraid of his brothers and sisters. And so and the people who mock that, the reason I bring this up here in this session is because look at Genesis 6 and 7 very clearly. Look at who enters the ark, Noah and his 3 sons, right? Let's go actually to where we started. Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, that's 4 guys, and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his sons with him. That's it. So that's the only people who survived, and according to this verse, all flesh died, every man. There wasn't a single person left on the earth. Everyone died. And so there's only really 3 couples that repopulate the entire earth. So if you're going to mock the idea that how could all these people come from just Adam and Eve, well, then you're also mocking Scripture when it says clearly that Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their 3 wives repopulated the entire earth. You're mocking that too. So you're mocking Scripture. And so that needs to be corrected. And so anybody who wants to challenge me on that, I'll go to the mat for that, because you can't lead people to believe false things, because then, first of all, because you want to make a typological theory, you want to make a typological theory and make a prefigure and make that the truth rather than the literal historic truth. Well, that's not the way prefigures work, because you can clearly see in Genesis 22 through 24, Abraham comes down off the mountain, but it doesn't say he had Isaac with him. Now, literally, of course he had Isaac with him. Isaac doesn't stay there on the mountain, for years, just sitting up there by himself. Isaac comes back down with Abraham. Why does the Holy Spirit edit Isaac out of the record there? Because it's a type. It's typological, showing that Isaac doesn't show up with his bride Rebecca. The next time you see him is when he has his bride after he's been sacrificed on the mountain. It's a picture of Christ and the church. So typologically, the Spirit edits out the name of Isaac, but we know that in the literal, actual aspect of what happened, we know that Isaac came back down with Abraham after the whole prefigure sacrifice transpires. So when you say that, it means mankind, not man, because I want to make an 8th day paradigm work, it's like you're trying to say that Isaac stayed up on the mountain until Rebecca came, until Eliezer went and got Rebecca. That's ridiculous. You can't. You're having a feedback loop going into. You're having a feedback loop go from your prophetic prefigure hermeneutic, and you're feedback looping that into the literal historical account hermeneutic, and you can't do that. It's bad, bad doctrine, bad teaching. And so anyway, let's go on here and just look at this one last thing, because I want to show you how this really works. Okay, think about this. And God said, let us make man, that's mankind, in our image, in our likeness, etc., etc. So he created man, ha-adam, the man, the single man, Adam, in his own image. In the image of God created he, singular, him, et, definite article, the man, Adam, the man that you see in Genesis 2:7, and male, single female, he created he, them. Now, when he says he's going to make mankind, well, how did he make Adam? He made Adam with the ability to procreate. And so, in a sense, he creates all of mankind because Adam's seed is within him when he's created. But they're not other people there in the earth. They're all in the loins of Adam, as it says also regarding Melchizedek, and regarding, Paul talks about it, that Abraham, in the loins of Abraham, were the priestly descendancy of Levi, but they hadn't come on the scene yet. So Yes, they're going to come from Abraham. All the Levites are going to come from him, but and technically speaking, they're there because they're in his loins, so to speak. Likewise, that's how you can understand this. That yeah, he's going to make mankind, but he's going to make mankind a with a apex patriarch, Adam. That is going to be the first one, and from him, in his loins, so to speak, is going to come everybody else. Not that there's just like random people running around, for them to procreate with. That's ridiculous, because then those people don't have a sin nature. So you have like people, you're not thinking it through. Those people don't have a sin nature. So now Adam sinned, and now these other people don't sin. Now there's two classes of people: the people who sinned and the people who didn't sin. So the whole thing falls apart. It's completely bad teaching, and that's why I felt the Lord pressing on me to correct it. And so I'm doing it as strongly as I can, but as politely as possible. So anyway, moving on from there, let's get back to our primary focus, which is Genesis 7 today. And let's finish this up. And because we've already gone over time, I think, but sorry for that. So when we see this, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of the birds and the cattle and the beasts and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, from man to cattle, to the creeping things, to the birds of the heavens, and they were destroyed from the earth. And only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. Okay. And the water prevailed upon the earth 150 days. And so we're going to see when we get into Genesis 8, the timing of the whole thing and how many days it took place. There's some debate about it, but exactly how long from the time they went on the ark to the time of the flood, to the time the water started receding, to the time when they finally came off the ark, to the time when they kind of dispersed back into the land and came down off the mountain. So we're going to look at that whole timeline in the coming sessions in Genesis chapter 8, which is 22 verses. So we might be able to cover that all in one session. I don't know, that might be a long session, so we might split it up into two. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll take a look at that starting next week. So until then, that wraps it up for this video, and hope you are enjoying our Genesis series. As always, I'm enjoying putting it together, and God bless you. We'll see you here, there, in the air, or in the next video. God bless you.